Good afternoon, Free Enterprise fans, and welcome to Qualifier number 14 of Highway to the Zemus Zone. This afternoon, we have Moonblaze Wolf on the restream, Warlink clicking our buttons for us, and I'm joined in the commentary booth by my good friend Nth. Hi, Nth.
Hello, and again, welcome everyone to this, the 14th and second to last qualifier for the Highway to the Zemus Zone 4, and the first of two today as well. This is the final day, the final chance for everyone, so pressure is kind of on here.
Yeah, so, there's only a couple times left to improve your times, and so we may see some people maybe trying some routing that they might normally not try, or taking some high-risk plays in order to get that average time up so they can either make the field or make the top 16.
Absolutely, and with these objectives too, it's going to be very interesting because we've got the triple boss hunt seed today. We've rolled defeat Mylon and defeat the D-Lunars for those extra objectives in addition to defeat Wyverns. There's going to be a lot of checking locations, a lot of extra incentive to go places where you might not be quite as incentivized to go, such as, Baron, places like that. If one of them's down in the bottom of the Fame Arch, that'd be great. And now's a good time also to give a quick introduction to our four runners today. And in the upper left, we have Ground Flyer, who is, very familiar face around the community and in a pretty good spot so far on the standings. So, definitely in good shape. On the upper right, we have Bardic Panda, who might want to take a few more risks to try and push his way into that top 64. Not quite there right now. And on a similar note also is Marty, down in the lower left-hand corner, who also only has the 2 finished races so far, so we'll need and complete both qualifiers today in order to qualify for the tournament, or at least have a chance to. And on the lower right-hand corner, we have Direwolf, who has been putting in some really, really impressive times lately. Last night's qualifier was second in the one before that, so definitely one to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. We should see some pretty exciting racing today. And we have a Sid start, which, Sid's probably, in that kind of S tier of starting characters. Starts with a decent amount of hit points, can do some of the early checks. And if you get paired with somebody with a little bit less power, can kind of sit with them until they get powered up.
Yeah, and also with the Sea Hero flag on, for those who haven't watched very much of Zemus Zone 4, Sea Hero is making its tournament debut in this, and what that flag does, if you are a bit new to the randomizer, is it means that that character is going to be doing the fight at the top of Mount Ordeal solo, and all of the agility calculations done in the game, which is a bit more of a complicated scenario, are done around that hero, meaning we have one of the better agility heroes as well. So they'll have a lot easier time handling their agility and can maybe take a few more risks later on in those fights where that matters more. And a Cecil start as well. That is pretty nice.
Yeah, it certainly incentivizes, possibly not an immediate, but an early ordeals play, because you get to see 3 bosses now, and you get to upgrade that Dark Knight Paladin, or Dark Knight Cecil to a Paladin Cecil, who then can actually use some useful items. So we'll see where our various runners go first.
Yeah, the only real downside to these two is that they are, they're attacker characters, and they're sort of that breakdown where you have your attacker characters, which are more equipment based, and your magic characters, which are more level based. So they are in that position where they do have to find equipment now at this point in time. Sid doesn't matter quite as much. Sid's gonna do his job being a really good chemist and a really good lead weight if need be. But for the most part, you know, they're in a good place. Also, there's another Cecil in that inn, so that's not going to be a place they're going to be rushing to right away.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't been watching the qualifiers quite as closely, we do have a no dupes flag on, so we can't pick up that second Dark Knight Cecil and then have two Cecils and possibly find an Excal and a Crystal Sword and get them to go burr. Looks like we're checking the waterfall here, and we find Asura, which we're going to completely reset out of because there's no sense in doing that today. But otherwise, our runners are kind of going the loot route, probably, as you said, Enth, looking for that equipment to bring their kind of physical attackers online. The other thing that, with a highly physical party, is that just makes you want to find those white mages out there a little bit more and get both of our gentlemen here a little bit more angry so that they can take on these bosses.
Definitely. I've seen an Ogre Axe up on Ground Flyer's side, so that's a really good early power spike for Sid. If you get another one, you could equip that to Cecil later on down the line. So nothing quite great for that Cecil yet, but in general, you know, just something for that Sid is going to be the most important immediate concern, so that you can be sure he's going to have no problem with that Ordeals fight.
Certainly. And we seem to have found Leviathan, which we're also going to nope out of. We don't need to see, and we'll go see who the character is up on Hobbs here. I do like that we're seeing, you know, quite a bit of divergence, you know, possibly rechecking. And there's a Yang. I don't know how I feel about Yang. Obviously, we're going to take him and see what this blue robe is for us. And it is the gauntlet here on Mount Hobbs, and we're going to go ahead and reset out of that. Yang probably isn't worth waiting through that whole gauntlet to gain. He does end up in a nice place, but it does take a little bit to get there.
Yeah, Yang is where I note there are exceptions to what I was saying about how your attackers tend to scale with equipment and casters tend to scale with levels. Yang is secretly a caster. He casts Punch, and that will scale more heavily with levels too. So it could be good picking up an early Yang if you're going to want to use him, because you want to get that XP on him and you want to make that a long investment. But right now they have no way of clearing that gauntlet without attacking every single one down one at a time, and it would take way too long. Even though they do have good Yang equipment too. There's a Thunder Claw on one of these chests. There's a Fire Claw on one of the chests too, so you're getting his elemental coverage too. I think it might be something where you might see our runners go back for that Yang later.
Yeah, I think it depends on where the seed routes them and what other character checks. Ooh, we have a Sparkle at the bottom of Antlion. Let's see. It's just our friend, the Pale Dim, the dragon who is pale, and this shouldn't be a hard fight for the equipment that Dyer and our other runners have picked up. So we'll see if this becomes some sort of advancement. At this point as a runner, I think I'm looking for that Earth Crystal to maybe get those couple other character checks if I think I can make it through Zot.
Yeah, it is kind of the weird question of this seed where, you know, you always want that underground access early, but how much would you rather almost be funneled down some of these overworld checks, at least for a bit? Because I feel like there's a tendency to get that underground access and rush that, and then, you know, maybe have more decision points from there. But at the same time, you know, a Baron Key is not bad with 3 boss hunts on the table.
No, not at all. Baron is a very, very seductive check for us. You know, I would definitely be pulled in that direction. I don't know if my Sid and Dark Knight can take it, but especially with the equipment we've found or possibly haven't found to date. But yeah, and the interesting thing too is, with the 3 boss hunts and Cave Bahamut, you know, technically we're a Darkness Crystal from a possible go mode. You know, we don't have that many of our objectives gated behind scavenger hunts. This seed is once we find the darkness crystal, of course.
Yeah, it's kind of the fun of this boss hunt, Heavy Seeds. You sort of nailed what I didn't notice there, which is that a moon play is a lot more attractive when you want to clear 6 bosses. So at any point in time, if we get a darkness crystal, that really is going to just completely change this game entirely. And waiting for that to drop is going to be very, very interesting indeed. But we have seen Bardic is actually going to go through with this for this Yang, having found an Earth Hammer along the way, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, it seems like now we have 2 casters. We have a Punch Mage and a Quake Mage. Not going to help on these cockatrices, of course, but should make that a little bit speedier for Bardic, and that Yang will be that little bit of power, maybe get Bardic through some checks that the others can't get through, but still kind of looking seems to be for that key, no pun intended, that would unlock the seed a little bit for us here.
Yeah, and looking at these shops that Direwolf is going through now, we do see a samurai bow in the Baron shop. And if you find good arrows, you could equip that to your Cid and be pretty good. I guess we have fire arrows and white arrows, which they'll do, but they're not perfect. And then once you get up Mount Ordeals, you could, put that axe onto Cecil or something like that, and then have 2 characters that are good to just punch through everything. And going through this for this Yang might not be as appealing in that case, especially once you just have that ball rolling.
Yeah, that definitely makes some sense. And the other thing that occurs to me too is that if you buy the bow for Cid in this case and hand it off and get some good arrows, you're probably not wasting that investment, because if you find a white mage or other people, you're probably going to be able to pass that set of equipment off to continue to help out some of your other characters. So it's not like a dead investment for you here. And it looks like Ground Flyers decided to take this Yang, and we're gonna go see who is at Fabul. And
ooh, that's a purple robe, and that is our first objective number 4, Mylon and Friends. So this will be a very good find for both Marty and Direwolf, and I gotta assume that if you're in Bardic and Ground Flyer's shoes where you don't have an access underground, you might be a bit more excited to go and do this Fabul check. But also on things you're going to be excited to find, Bardic finding the black sword on the other side of this Mount Hobbs, so he can actually put that on his Dark Knight Cecil for now, and maybe going and getting that done is not quite as pressing as it was before, now that you have the best sword that Dark Knight Cecil can possibly equip.
Yeah, the black swords, when you're carrying the less preferred Cecil around, probably not something you're actively looking for. I'm not even sure I'd buy it out of a shop necessarily, but you'll definitely take it. You'll definitely put it on our friend there and let him contribute to some of these checks you're going to run here. And we're through Mylon on Fabul, so it looks like a lot of our runners are going to be kind of funneled in that way with the current power level they have. And the king will give us a nice magma key, so that's the underground access. So it'll be interesting to see where Marty goes from here.
Yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate, because I was about to note how much I find Bardic's Ordeals play both interesting and potentially really, really good. And then that magma key dropped while I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, it's a good play, but I am no longer convinced that it's the right one for this seed, and that's a little bit of a problem. Obviously, we'll see from these Ordeals bosses. There are 3 bosses up here, so again, this is even more incentivized than it would normally be. If you had the only thing that this seed is missing right now to scream, please go to Mount Ordeals, is Atella in the party. So we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And two, I don't hate the Ordeals play, because most of our runners are likely going to make this play at some point. I mean, there's probably some scenario where you dump Cecil, but it's a very low percentage play. We have a Sparkle in the Mylon and Friends spot, who turns out to be our D-Lunars, so, you know, Ordeals is looking better now.
Well, if we wanted to have 2 objectives out of the way right away, I guess we're here. What's interesting to me now is that this sort of shifts it back, because it's not as likely that Ordeals will have underground access now that we know that Magma Key is sitting in Fabul. And because of that, if Marty, Direwolf, and now Groundflyer is going through this, go underground and don't find anything there and are sort of, you know, taking the long way around to Ordeals, this could be a bit of an immediate benefit to Panda. But Panda is having a little bit of trouble with this D-Lunar fight right now.
Yeah, it's not... It's definitely not free anywhere you find them, but looks like we may just be able to get through it with enough Earth Hammer activations here, and it looks like Marty and Dyer are taking the trip downtown. Probably, you know, there's a few good free checks down here that we'll see them make. It looks like Dyer's gonna go to the Fey March. Oh, and we use the Star Veil to frog some D-Lunars, it looks like.
Very good play by Panda there. If you drop those Star Veils onto a character, eventually those D-Lunars will cast Breath and turn themselves into Toads. And now with both of them into Toads, you can basically just punch them down completely free. Makes this fight very, very easy. Very good play there, because that's almost a little bit tricky to time at first. We do see a rat tail here down at the bottom of Feymarch, which is interesting and also completely worthless to us right now.
Yeah, we're probably looking for the hook no matter what, especially with those 2 boss checks on the table. Although I guess we found 2 out of 3 of them now, so maybe we're not. But until we get that hook, the rat tail just isn't going to do anything for us. And we'll probably see Dyer and Marty check the bosses down here. But one thing that's different about Zemus Zone 4 is that we don't have the K-Summon flag on, which means that the 2 spots down here are not actually holding any of our key items and cannot be progression for us unless one of them is Wyvern.
Well, that is a Dark Knight Cecil out of the pool from the bottom of Feymarch there, so you know he won't be hiding in one of the spookier spots, so he can be in, like, that Cave Bahamut spot as an example. Unfortunately, speaking of bosses in inconvenient locations, Panda has found an evil wall in the back attack spot on Mount Ordeals, which is about as unfun as it immediately sounds, and you can hear in my tone of voice while describing it. Another important thing to note, though, just to sort of swing back to Direwolf's side, is I saw him in that item shop down in Feymarch. There is a light sword for Paladin Cecil and a rune axe available down there. So those are 2 very, very potentially powerful pieces of equipment. And once we have enough money, I would almost say that if you don't have better equipment for that Cecil, you might be tempted to head back down the Feymarch at some point.
Absolutely, that is a great shop to find, and you know, it's not really that far out of the way to go grab some nice equipment. Marty did face check that leg for us and discovered that it was indeed Rubicant and not the elements, so we know which of those bosses is sitting there and that we won't discover somewhere else, which is good knowledge to have. You know, preparing for the elements fight is a little bit different. And Bardic does get through that mean evil wall spot, so you know, probably there's probably some bosses that can be behind this this Ordeals check that Sid can't take, but I don't know how many there's going to be. This doesn't seem like it should worry our runners very much, sending Sid alone in here.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a few of the potentially rude bosses already, so that's pretty good. And we're seeing a Luca key now, which is, you know, a bit less tempting. And it does look like it's Water Hag, so hey, if you wanted about the easiest thing you can deal with as a solo Sid, there you go.
Yeah, you know, just kind of stare at it. Seems pretty good. Does make the check a little bit long, but probably everybody's going to end up coming through here anyway, so you're not really quote-unquote wasting time. It's just when you take that time. And our other runners seem to be following suit up on ordeals here. Direwolf climbing and Groundflyer in their D-Lunars fight here. So interesting to see where this takes us afterwards. I don't know that in my mind I'm checking Luca immediately after this, but maybe I don't have a lot of choice.
I think it's an interesting question. I think it's different for Panda, who has not gotten that Baron key, to my understanding, has not gone down Antlion Cave. For him, if he goes up to Fabul and ends up getting that Magma key, then he's a lot more incentivized to go to Sealed Cave than, say, Direwolf, Marty, and Groundflyer, who all kind of are probably going to be more tempted to go to Baron Inn, do that check for the key item and the extra boss slot they haven't seen yet, and then head into Baron potentially from there, which has 3 more chances for that boss spot. And also, we did just see on Marty's end, he's the first to go back and check Sheila 1, and it is a vanilla pan, so he's going to be heading back underground to go bonk Yang again, and we'll end up seeing what Sheila 2 is here shortly.
Yeah, and with the location of that pan and Magma key, it pretty much means that there's no time to be saved here trying to condense your Fabul checks, and so, you know, making that early Fabul play seems like a good, it seems like it's going to have turned out to be a really good play. Evil Wall in both Dire and Groundflyer's spot. And yeah, I wonder how much longer Bardic's going to kind of fade that Antlion. That may be, we were talking about at the beginning, some of our runners possibly taking some risks. That may be the risk Bardic has decided to make today, as we're going in and checking Baron now.
Yeah, I think this is a very solid routing choice. It's a very risky routing choice because he's taking the way more difficult overworld spots as opposed to the sort of 2 quote-unquote easy spots. And we'll see if it pays off. Like, if this ends up being Wyvern and then he heads straight to Antlion Cave, which it's not, it's Plague in this case, then this could be pretty big here because he's, again, a lot more incentivized to keep going through this overworld than everyone else is who maybe has more options.
Yeah, and if this leads to different checks, you may see some very interesting routing because, you know, if we can find Wyvern somewhere that's not on the moon, you know, it's looking like, unlike I was saying earlier, you know, you may not even need the moon except for Zeromus access. Looks like Elements is the second boss here, which can be a little bit rude, but at this spot, I don't think that we're going to have a lot of problems here, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, 1900 hit from Sid and it's already gone, so that ended up definitely not being a problem. Does get the Legend Sword from it, so that is half of that Forge in this case. 1 key item away there. The question on my mind is, on Bardic Panda's side, where do you go from here? Because right now you have the 2 different options of Antlion Cave and Fabul. And I feel like if you're committing to fading the early spots, you might be a bit more tempted to keep fading Fabul and hope for your underground access at Antlion Cave than you might be to go to Fabul. But it also depends on your reasons for fading Antlion Cave. Like, if he's fading Antlion Cave because he doesn't have exit yet, then that will be taken care of pretty quickly with this Cecil, so you might end up going to Fabul first in that case.
Yeah, and depending on where Bardic goes, too, since he's powered up on ordeals, you know, he may be able to get through the checks a little bit faster than our other runners. You know, that is somewhat the advantage that you get to your routing is if you can take less time on required checks, then you do end up saving that time no matter when you ended up taking them. It's just where it sends you that was completely worthless, and Bardic's face checking the bosses that we've seen already on this seed here. As the other runners kind of finish their ordeals and their shopping here. It looks like Bardic is going to go and face that Antlion at the bottom here.
Yeah, one more thing I want to note too is that Marty has followed the rest of that pan chain through, and Sheila 2 did end up being that tower key. So that's another good reason for Marty to go underground once he gets through the Mount Ordeals check. And you know, he might be a bit more tempted than everyone else who seems to be content going through some of these overworld things. Groundflyer, I believe, has not gone underground yet anyways, so has not at all prepped it. And then Direwolf, if he keeps going through these and doesn't end up going to check that Sheila 1 check for a bit, is potentially having a different route through this start. I'm not sure if Marty will try for those because I think that he might be a little bit underpowered to take some of this underground stuff right now, but it is a lot more of a possibility for him.
Yeah, for sure. But did you happen to see who was in the bed? I wasn't quite looking when we were there.
It looked like a Kane, so we're here in this oops, all berserkers and no way of gaining berserk seed, which is an interesting situation. If that was a Kane, like we're pretty sure it was, then you really are looking for a white mage right now. And if you can't find a white mage, then you're looking for an edge, and you can at least steal Bacchus wines and pretend you have a white mage by having Sid throw potions for the rest of the seed. So we're in really good shape for a potentially good endgame party if we find that Sand Ruby. We just need to find everything that enables it first.
Yeah, for sure. And as the seed kind of progresses in front of us, and we've seen a couple of our checks, and another one is a boss. We may end up in a space where our runners are having to decide between where they're gonna go to get powered up for the Z fight. The seed is, I'm gonna curse it by saying the seed looks really jetty right now, but if these checks all kind of turn out for our runners, then we may be at 1,000 hit points and trying to figure out how we're gonna kill Z.
The thing that concerns me at the moment is really just how do you get these characters to be as strong as their potential is. And right now, that's not really a thing that we've found. Just mentioned in chat, 1200 HP strats. I mean, it's possible, but it would be... I mean, you don't want to do 1200 HP strats with this many berserkers because you're hoping... And also, the lack of star veils is a big problem in this case.
Yeah, and you don't even have any wall casters yet, and so you can't even kind of make up for that quite yet until, you find at least a wall caster, which, at this point, I think that any of our runners would take anybody who could cast wall, because then they could probably also cast Cure and Berserk.
Well, Groundflyer is keeping things interesting here. He's going to be the first to head down into this waterway, head into Barren Castle, continuing to fade the entire underground, which is one of those things. It's like, I can't help but sort of chuckle a little bit at it, because you see everyone else get Magma Key and they're like, ooh, I'm going underground right away. I'm going to see what treats are lying for me down there. And Groundflyer is just completely committed to doing everything but that, and I really appreciate the bit of risk there.
Yeah, it seems like it's so far from what we've seen in the underground too. We're still pretty early in this, but I don't know what was down there that was an extremely compelling reason to go right now. I think Groundflyer may be making the correct play here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he doesn't have the knowledge that we have, but right now all we've seen is a vanilla rat tail, a vanilla pan from Sheila 1, and that pan leads to a tower key. So right now, going underground really only leads to an IOU for a key item once we find a hook, and more underground. So that's pretty interesting. And also, as was just pointed out by our restreamer Blaze in chat, we have not seen a white mage yet, and Barren Castle is a character check. So any character check is very, very important. And also this French vanilla Kenatsu is probably not going to pose too much of a problem. So we already knew going in that this wasn't going to be the most difficult thing in the world, especially with a Thunderclaw already for that Yang.
Yeah, for sure. The big payoff here is who's going to be under the clothes when we throw them off on the throne, and then who's in the spot where Sid actually cannot be. So we will not have a vanilla Sid today. One of the effects of the Sea Hero flag is you just won't find your hero anywhere else. Your hero is unique in this, and so we'll have to see who else is sitting there. Maybe it'll be another Dark Knight Cecil.
To answer a question from Neobari in chat, has there been Cure 3 potions found? Yes, and that was concerning me too. Because you're guaranteed, I think, Cure 3 potions on the overworld if there's not a white mage in the seed, and we found Cure 3 potions in the Fabul item shop. So that is terrifying to see, because you now have this thing, and there's got to be, if that registers as a thing in your brain, which, sometimes you might just think, I'm going to have to take this as it is, and I can't really think about it too much. But to me, that would be eating away at me. Like, what if there isn't a white mage?
Yeah, that's definitely weighing on my mind if I'm going through this seed. There's a question in chat of which character would be least welcome, and suggests Edward. I would probably agree that you don't really want an Eddie. One of the things is, Eddie can get you through some pretty hard checks, and actually Marty is in one of them. Eddie does make the evil wall quote-unquote free. It takes a little bit of time, but it does work. But we've seen 2 of the checks that Eddie trivializes evil wall, and then that Dark Knight on the Queen spot, I believe. So we have Odin left that Eddie could help with if Odin is somewhere, but Odin if not somewhere, Eddie's utility is kind of quickly falling here.
Yeah, and I gotta say, this isn't a party that looks like it's gonna have too much trouble with Odin, even if we don't find that Berserk. So I think definitely Edward is the worst option here.
Yeah, and it looks like we found the other Mylon on the throne, which still is a character check, still is going to be a key item once we get through this. Again, not thinking that this is going to pose any problems for our powered up Cecil, or with our Yang our Punch Mage somewhat online at this point. 400 is not too bad here, but we'll see what is in the Baron trash can and who's been hiding out in the castle for us.
Yeah, I think another interesting question while we're on the note of what's the worst character you can find here is, what is the best character you could possibly find in this case? And I gotta think at this point in time, like, your top 2 is gonna be either Rosa for obvious good white mage reasons, or possibly even Tella to secure a grind. As much as I'll admit the amount that I want to see a D machine grind is basically 0, having access to that could be very, very important for later on in the seed. So those are probably 2 big prizes, with Porum a close third, only because Porum really needs extra levels to get there. But there's not really many bad options except for a dupe. And how would you like another Yang?
So we asked for a mage, and we got one that punches. Yeah, that's unfortunate there. I think you covered off on the top 3 choices, though. I don't even know. I'm pretty disappointed with Iridia at this spot, too. I normally really enjoy Iridia more than most people, but, it's somebody who's still going to take some levels to get online and maybe can help us with some checks, but isn't really contributing to our Z fight in the way that we need them to. So, yeah, some white mage and telecounts in this instance would have been great here. But we'll see what's here in the basement. While we have, looks like Bardic and Dyer are here too, and the Earth Crystal. That is, I wouldn't be surprised to see Groundfire go check that next. You have the Treasury, and you have a couple character checks up there. And I think we have the power to take it at this point.
We definitely do. You also definitely want those character checks. And another interesting thing too is, sort of going back to that character discussion where you're noting Iridia. I'm not even sure you even take Palom at this point either. You have such a really, really good physical setup that you don't really want to necessarily have that, because you can cut out most of your grind as long as you find a Berserk caster. And also, another thing worth noting is Direwolf is going to get this Yang without having to have done the Mount Hobbs fight, so that's going to be a real benefit.
Great! Yeah, with Hobbs the words are hard sometimes. In the Fagul fight, you know, saving that time's going to have been great. But let's see what's on this treasury here. Looks like we found a nice curse ring, and that crystal armor may be useful, but it looks like we just found a bunch of equipment for characters we haven't seen yet, which is a little bit disappointing for our current party, but maybe helps power us up in the future.
I'm really happy to see a cursed ring here, if I'm in anyone's shoes. When you have Sid Hero, when you have all of your agility calculations done based around that Sid, because agility is the true mage stat of this game, you can definitely figure out your agility very easily with that cursed ring and that. So in this case, I think we're in really, really good shape having found that. And I think, honestly, out of everything that could be in that treasury, outside of maybe the super lucky, like, crystal sword kind of drop out of it, very happy to see that cursed ring.
Yeah, the cursed ring is great, but, you know, the Sork robes that don't do anything for us, it probably, you know, could have been replaced with something else. But, you know, treasuries can't all be 10 out of 10, 2 crystal swords and everything. So, taking as we said, taking that trip up to Zot here. Looks like we're gonna try and find the treasure chests here too. That flame dog chest can contain some good equipment for us.
Yeah, I mean, we really are in just the equipment hunt at this point, in addition to the white mage hunt, and you're already actively working towards that character, so you might as well try and find something here. I'm not sure that Tower of Zot has the best treasure distribution on these flags, so I'm not sure you'll get the really, really good stuff out of the trap chest, but it never hurts to find it. I think what matters absolutely more than everything, of course, is going to be this character check, because if this ends up being more dupes, if this ends up being Edward, if this even ends up being one of the 2 black mages we haven't found yet, this could end up being a big disappointment in the end.
For sure. Depends on what item we get up here too and which bosses we see, but if it's a complete zonk. Oh, and we got one of the bosses we probably didn't want to see in Bahamut up here.
I think it'll be fine. I'm pretty sure he has enough damage to get through this before the Mega Nuke goes off, and if not, you know, you can always reset and throw up a Star Veil and get through it easily. So I think this is probably a fine boss to find. It's just a potentially annoying one to find. This looking like he's going to throw that Star Veil up on Sid, so should be using the Reflect strat to sail through this here.
Yeah, it isn't going to be hard either way, but, you know, probably not the nuke caster we were looking for up here.
Yeah, and it's a shame that you can... It's almost a shame that you can Star Veil through Mega Nuke sometimes. You kind of... I want to see, like, Mega Nuke Pierce's Star Veil sort of thing as, like, a wacky flag kind of thing. Like, you know, make it so the cheese strategies for these bosses really don't work.
Yeah, that might be interesting, or maybe it penetrates a Star Veil but doesn't penetrate a Moon Veil, so then that creates the question of whether or not you use it on that Bahamut or Wyvern check, kind of depending on how your flags end up here. And it looks like Bardic has found that Flame Dog chest, so probably won't have any problems with the dog itself, but we'll see what our loot situation becomes here when we get that. And oh hey, look, it's one of the characters we said we didn't want to see. Hi Radia, how are we doing today?
Well, that is good information. Riddy is not the worst thing in the world. There's sort of like two tiers of potentially bad things to find here. And while she can't cast Berserk, in a pinch, if you find Asura somewhere, you could at least use her as a sort of backup white mage. But hey, there's a Rosa right here at the top of Tower of Zot. So we've finally found that white mage, and I gotta think that this is looking like a very strong party composition as a whole. Maybe just knock that Rydia over and slingshot her later.
Absolutely. And then with finding that Rosa, that pays off all of the time we're going to spend in this check, especially some of the gear we found in the treasury and everything. It doesn't matter what boss is here or what I get out of it. This was probably worth it, especially if this is the only place you can get a Rosa. That's going to help Groundflyer immensely through the rest of this seed.
Definitely. And this is also pretty much exhausting all of these overworld checks. So Groundflyer is going to be in a lot more interesting of a shape based off of routing when he gets to that underground, because once he gets underground, he's going to stay there pretty much. And given that Marty's gone through the pan check, Direwolf will probably go through the pan check at some point in time too. He might end up not having that tower key incentivized, so if that tower ends up being anything particularly useful, it will end up working out worse for him. But on the whole, right now, his route is looking very good.
Right. He's gonna be able to probably take, he might even be able to he might do top a tower, without the key even, just to see what it is. So reduces sort of that play. And I'm liking this party even for Dwarf Castle. Stay down there, do all your checks at once, and like you said, probably way more efficient in our routing. This Antlion's a little bit rude. Probably not going to pose a terrible problem here. Interesting to see if we leave Rosa on the ground and maybe go crack an egg, maybe one egg for some experience for them or not, depending on how we're feeling the seed is progressing for us.
Definitely. I gotta think getting that Rosa to Berserk is your absolute highest priority in the seed now that we found her, and cracking an egg should accomplish that, I'm pretty sure. Might take 2. I don't remember exactly how much XP you need on Rosa in order to get to that Berserk point. I know that she learns it later than Aurum at least. So it's possible there could be going for it. But I think this sort of like looking at Groundflyer's route versus everyone else's route is a good example of not only do your routing decisions matter, but also everyone else's routing decisions can make yours better or worse in comparison. Because how this ended up being is everyone who went underground has still been shepherded through all of these overworld checks. And so because of it, Groundflyer will have that bit of time investment once he gets underground. But, like we were saying, he can just go through everything down there and has managed to save that little bit of efficiency there. And I think that's possibly very important for how the rest of this race shapes up. If there's like a 1 or 2 minute difference in the end, that'll be where that 1 or 2 minute difference came from.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how checks can or can't pay off, because if you compare, Bardic and Dire are almost synced at this point. Bardic just missing that rat tail. And Bardic made some very different choices that could have paid off, but as you said, is funneled back into this check where, Groundflyer is going to get through it. And Groundflyer's the same levels too, so you didn't really gain a lot of advantage, unfortunately, from that. So sometimes things pay off and sometimes things don't. We'll see. Groundflyer seeming to have a little bit of trouble with this Antlion. Maybe I spoke too soon. And Antlion is down here for us. So.
And also, a bit unfortunately, Marty went and checked these Troya shops, saw the cursed ring in the armor shop, immediately bought it. If he goes to check this treasury, he's going to be very disappointed to see those 2 cursed rings in there. But, it's another one of those really good decisions that just ends up being the wrong one for the seed. So, it's not like that was a bad choice, but it does hurt a little.
Yeah, it's going to have turned out to hurt, but it's a decision I think everybody would make at that point. You don't want to have to come back here if it's not in the treasure area. You don't find it somewhere else, so... And Groundflyer getting that package. Groundflyer's party, I don't think we checked that. I think we go turn our magma key and start underground, but we'll see what they decide to do here for us. Looks like I am wrong. We are going to go see who's on package.
I think you check it on the off chance that it's like the 1 or 2 characters that might improve your party even more. Second Rosa is a no. But if that had been like an edge, then yeah, I think maybe I sit through a package cutscene for an edge, and on the off chance that there's a wyvern hiding behind that package check, that would be a huge advantage. So Rosa, you're not sitting through a cutscene for a dupe.
Yeah, I think that I almost might be looking more for a Porum. Porum Rosa is a great combination on these flags, and I would replace Rydia with a Porum in a heartbeat right now. Couple Berserk casters are better than one, and having some backup healing for your harder fights it seems like we're going to be funneled into it never really hurts you. But yeah, Porum or Edge probably are my choices there. But the real payoff would be finding Wyvern and possibly getting to fade one of the other objectives, depending on other people's routing.
Yeah, I think maybe you take a Palom if he's there too, because just it takes a lot less experience to slingshot a Palom than it does a Rydia even. You can get Rydia up there, but it's a little bit... I think maybe you take a Tella if there's a Tella behind the package too, because again, I am sorry, chat, to bring this evil upon us all, but D Machine is a very efficient grind, so that would enable it. And we don't really have great grind opportunities yet, because we don't really have a great way of getting through the giant grinds. We don't have a renewable source of sirens yet, so we're in an interesting shape for that when it gets to be later in the seed.
Yeah, we'll have to see what the other characters are kind of thrust upon us here, but maybe it's going to be that mythical seed that everybody's been asking for, where the grinds are really, really interesting, and maybe with that Luca key, you go do some doors. That might not be the worst, especially if you're kind of not on the slingshot plan. And if that's progression, then or the Wyvern, it really does kind of help you there. I think our runners probably, before getting to that point, are going to at least look for that 10 key item experience bonus to double your fun during your grinds. But Groundflyer, as we said, is going underground, doing some of the checks. Wouldn't be surprised to see Groundflyer though go take that dwarf castle at this point.
Definitely. And I just want to repeat this joke that Jenica just made in chat for the benefit of immortalizing it for the YouTube, that D Machine is the washing dishes by hand of FE, which is extremely true at this point in time, where like you really wish you just had a dishwasher, but I mean, it's still going to get the dishes done, even if it's not a great time. So, I mean, we'll see. And the other thing too is there was a question in chat of what's left. Right now, basically the entire underground is all that's left. So we do have that Luca key, we do have that tower key, we also have Dwarf Castle. And at this point in time, I think Dwarf Castle is the most tempting of the three, because you still kind of aren't finished with your character hunting, I feel. You still want someone that will enable one of those easier grinds. And I think you're kind of, like you'd mentioned doors, I think if you are mentioning doors, then that kind of is a good point that you might not necessarily want to take Sealed Cave, because you might be saving that for later so that you can combine it with a door grind, and you're not double dipping if that ends up being your only choice.
Yeah, for sure. But my grind enabler, to your earlier point, I'm hoping slightly more for an Edge than I am a Tella on this. If we're doing Zerk strats, the Steel Command, first off, giving you the sirens that you can grind is probably going to be a little bit better, and then you should be able to find a Bacchus steal as well and set yourself up well for the end of the game here, but we'll see where we're kind of going from there.
Yeah, at very least one of the reasons to want an edge is gone at this point in time. The silk webs we found in Damsian basement. I'm not sure everyone's gone there, but at very least we know we do have a silk web already for the Z fight, so that's pretty good there. So that does lower that value a tiny bit. Another thing too about wanting to go Dwarf Castle that I'm just remembering now that we've seen this on Marty's side is we do know that second spot is an Octoman, which is not the most difficult of bosses to have in that second spot where it's got low HP. So that's probably going to shepherd people a bit more towards Dwarf Castle too, because you'll know what both bosses are before you even really get a start on either one of them.
Yep, and it looks like Ground Flyer is going to follow kind of one of the old rules of FE is do your freebies. Going to go ask Sheila what she would like to provide today, and she is going to give us a big old vanilla sundae, and we're going to head back underground for that. So, you know, maybe that chain isn't paying off as much as we would like, but certainly not a bad play with the information that Ground Flyer has in front of him. Looks like Direwolf is in a fight with a Naga. I'm not really sure where that is. Is that tower?
Yep, that is a trap chest in Tower of Babel. Is the searcher that summons Naga. He's already taken down the searcher, so checking those trap chests, still looking for good equipment to get that Cecil going. We just really haven't hit on it yet, and I did not even catch that because that went by so quickly, but it looked like maybe a rune axe. My eyes are not good enough for that.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at the exact spot in the screen. I needed to be looking to see what it was, so I kind of missed it too. So maybe Chatter or Tracker can help us out a little bit. But trap chests are a pretty good play. You get some experience out of it. They do have a very high chance of having some Cecil equipment. With the new patch of free enterprise, you know, Cecil's good swords have been all moved up to a new tier 8. And so there's only a few places in the seed that even have a chance of having that. But if you roll a tier 8, likely it's going to be something good for Cecil.
Yeah, it's actually 100% guaranteed in this flag set with the no adamants flag on that it'll be something good for Cecil too, because it's it can't be an adamant armor, and it's just adamant, crystal sword, and Excalibur, so it's definitely there. And we are kind of hitting a point where maybe like you could figure out like a Mac Giant grind, as was just pointed out in chat. I think we're in pretty good shape. But a demist at this Dwarf Castle spot, that's exciting. Certainly a lot more exciting than this top of tower Golbez.
Yeah, so you got demist and Octoman on your Dwarf Castle's probably, like you said, a better play than our fun dragon cutscene here. Rosa and Rydia already laying down, so it'll be a little bit faster, but you know, still got to sit through some ha-ha-has.
Yeah, I think Direwolf's plan is to keep both Rosa and Rydia down until he figures out what he's doing for a grind and then goes there. So probably looking for a Darkness Crystal at this point in time. You know, we could do a Mac Giant grind. It's certainly possible. And right now we're at, let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9 key items. So really you just need that one more before you're at that point. You might as well leave them on the ground and then slingshot them and save a lot of time later.
Yeah, that totally makes some sense. Even if your plan is to do an egg, it just makes that egg that much more valuable for your casters. But, you know, it does make that, does make one of those searcher grinds, either Mac Giant or D Machine, looking pretty tempting. You know, obviously D Machine, we need a source of weak, so can't really find that anywhere else. And I missed this the first time, but Yang did give us a Cat Claw, which is pretty much the best equipment Yang can equip, so that's actually a great find.
Yeah, and also super annoying on Direwolf's side that I didn't notice is that I had looked away and I assumed that Golbez was the top of tower boss. No, that Golbez was in the Super Cannon room. The single most annoying boss that you can find in the Super Cannon room being one with a mandatory bunch of cutscenes at the start of it. So, yeah, that's only tempered by the idea that everyone else is going to have to go through that if they want to check that at some point in time.
Absolutely. And again, we still haven't seen Darkness, and we haven't found our Wyvern, so, you know, it's looking like our runners, interesting routing decisions aside, are probably all going to end up in very similar positions. Our key item grids for our 4 champions here today are all looking very, very similar. But we'll see who's on the top of tower. That's going to kind of, and see what these 2 checks give us is probably going to be pretty determinant of where we go from here.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously we'll see what happens and what Groundflyer and Marty choose, but right now what's going on with Bardic Panda and Direwolf is the most important thing that we're going to see in the near future. We now know, because there's a demist here, that this is effectively 2 key item checks from Dwarf Castle plus a character check. Direwolf obviously getting the 2 character checks out of tower here. If Darkness Crystal is in either one of those 2 sets, that's a really big tipping point.
Yeah, and I'm fairly certain that it's going to need to lead to Darkness at some point here. We're kind of running out of places where it can be. I mean, we could have another rabbit hole from, like, possibly a harp or a hook, but this is probably going to be where our Darkness has to be for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at any point in time, if that Darkness crystal drops, we're basically heading to the moon and probably trying to complete as much of the moon as possible while also doing our grind. But it does look like that was a Zonk at the top of tower there, so, you know, we're going to be heading down and seeing what's at the Super Cannon. Very tense. I think, to me, the best possible thing that we could see, of course, would be the Harp gating Darkness Crystal at Lukaki, but we'll see what goes on from there.
Yeah, I mean, best is a relative term at this point, right? Probably best for the viewing is going to be some rabbit hole. Of course, the runners are probably looking for our Darkness Crystal. I bet if Dire finds it here, they might even fade the Dwarf Castle altogether. For that character up there, and it is another Zonk. Well, sort of a Zonk. I think it puts 1, 2. It does. It is our 10th key item, which makes some of our grinding a little bit more. And Direwolf does head over, going to crack at least 1 egg here. It looks like in that 10 key items makes that Siren that much more valuable.
Well, there's that Porum you were wishing for up in Dwarf Castle, so that's an exciting moment. Bardic does drop out the Iridia for it, which I think is pretty exciting. You know, I definitely agree that having another Sorcerer Berserk where we don't have that edge to steal Bacchus's is pretty good. It does look like Direwolf is going to go for some eggs here and then reset out. So maybe not going to go for eggs. He just needs to set up his party a little bit differently there. But, you know, it really is just going to come down to this Dwarf Castle right now. Because if Bardic is able to go to the moon, that's going to be huge if Direwolf does not go to Dwarf Castle shortly after.
Yeah, and it looks like Dire's having a little bit of trouble getting through a whole egg here. Probably just needs to set up a little bit better. Ooh, and a full inventory, too. So the inventory boss is also lurking on Direwolf's side here. And it looks like we're going to get to see what our first item is here. And then I would expect Bardic to head right up and check Rydia's mom for the second one after dismissing her daughter out of the party.
Definitely, we just have to get through the spooky hand of doom here. My absolute favorite cutscene in the game. Can't wait to see how they do this in the upcoming remaster. Just going to slowly creep over there. So it is going to be a little bit. And while we're waiting for this, and while Groundflyer and Marty have also both committed to the tower, making this even spicier, That was a great time to give a quick shout out, of course, to all 4 of our runners. Make sure you give them all a follow, as well as our restream team, Blaze, for rolling this absolutely wonderfully fascinating seed. And there is the Darkness Crystal, and also Warlink for tracking. But yeah, Darkness Crystal at Dwarf Castle, and Bardic is the only one who has gone for Dwarf Castle first.
And that is a huge payoff for us. Bardic going to go, and I guess hasn't done any of the homework in the Sylph Cave yet, but wouldn't be surprised to see Bardic head up to that moon soon. And we know that that's probably going to be the right play at this point, with Zot being a big, or not Zot, but Babel being a big zilch here for us.
If you're Bardic, what do you do? Do you go to the moon? Do you get through the moon? Do you continue doing these underworld checks because you're not 100% sure on what you can do yet? It's a real big and interesting series of questions, and this is where the excitement of these races comes in. It's really all hinging on that. And there's over 50 other racers in this race. Obviously, we're really only going to focus on these 4 for today, but any of them took Dwarf Castle as well instead of Tower Key, that's going to have big impact on all 4 of our runners here in terms of their score towards the qualifier. So definitely a very, very spicy thing to find. Right now, it looks like Bardic is just going to keep going through this, might end up going back underground with the pan, and then we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I were in Bardic's shoes, I would probably be cutscenes aside, I would be at very least checking that character. The knowledge that I have a D machine grind probably makes my routing different after my freebie checks down here. So at very least, just checking for that, basically just Tella up there would possibly make me check these less. I probably prioritize tower, especially since Bardic hasn't even gotten the tower key yet. I may, if I found that Tella, may go turn in my freebies and then go grind.
Definitely. And another thing too is that on Direwolf's side, where he's doing these eggs, which he's still having a bit of a problem with, he's giving up slingshotting that Rosa and Rydia later. He's basically pretty much committed to leveling them up normally, so that could be a big efficiency thing. It does end up being a Sand Ruby here for that demist. And I gotta think at this point in time, I don't think we've seen good Cane equipment. I don't think you care about a Cane at this point.
No, I don't. I haven't seen anything that would draw me towards a Cane either. It looked like Bardic was going to check and see who the bosses were at package, or just checking the character on package, but with the duplicate, not going to go through with that check at all. And yeah, I can't see replacing... You'd replace Yang, I guess, with the Cane. I can't see that, especially having found that Cat Claw too. Or I guess Bardic actually doesn't have the Cat Claw yet, but we'll be getting it soon.
Yeah, Pancras pointing out that there is a white spear in that one of those Babel trap chests, so that could be a thing worth noting. I just don't think I see Bardic taking the Cane right now, because obviously he doesn't know that yet. Has not yet gone into Babel, but it might be an interesting thing for other runners. But speaking of interesting things our other runners are doing, Direwolf has committed to the next check that he's going to do, and that's Sealed Cave.
Yeah, I don't really hate this. Again, we were talking at the very beginning of the broadcast, sometimes you're going to have to make some checks that probably everybody else isn't going to make, and I feel like anytime you're in the Luca Key Cave, the Sealed Cave, and you have other checks, that's kind of what you're doing, at least a little bit. This check is nice, though, because you can peek both the item and the boss, and you're not necessarily committing to an entire fight. It still does take a lot of time to get down here and then back up with no black mages, or no black mages that know warp. So, you know, you're kind of committing some time, but if you find a wyvern or you find a good item, you know, if darkness was here for Dire, we know it's not, but if darkness is here, this looks like an excellent play.
Yeah, and speaking of which, you know, Bardic has that darkness crystal from the dwarf castle. I also noticed has found 2 hourglass 2s to go with the 2 sirens from the starter kit, and now has picked up that cane, replacing the cane with the Porum, so definitely committing to full berserker strats. I think that is really, really interesting because that would enable going up to the moon, going to the bottom of that Bahamut cave where you're going anyways, and doing those King Ryus instead. But speaking of very spicy things to find, Direwolf, having found that adamant rock at the bottom of Sealed Cave, is going to be in full-on go mode once he gets through Dwarf Castle. And the scary part of that is that Bardic might not be incentivized to go down here now that he has that Darkness Crystal.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I don't... I know it wouldn't be top of my routing list, but with the karate being free there, and we're definitely walking out this adamant. One of the things too, with our new Sea Hero flags, for those of you who have not been tuning in quite as often, instead of forging the Excalibur or possibly forging nothing and keeping the Excalibur, our flags have us forging an equipment from one of the Final Fantasy IV sequels or remakes, specific to your hero. So today we are going to get some equipment for Cid. Now, I'm not as up on exactly what Cid can get, but I know that there is that Thor hammer, which is great.
I'm actually looking it up to remember what else there is right now. I think there's also the Gigant Axe, which could be very, very useful, especially on Bardic's side. If he ends up going up, and that you could equip that Gigant Axe to Kane too, if you wanted. So there's a lot of pretty good options there. But, you know, I think you're hoping for the Thor hammer here out of the two.
Yeah, probably. Although, something you can pass off might be better, since you may be counting on doing a cursed ring at Zeromus, in which case, you know, the Thor hammer will help, but it wouldn't help as much as maybe it would normally. But we'll get a peek here real quick, as Dire's going to make this check, as I think almost everybody would. And we do get the Gigant Axe, so probably not the worst thing to find. You know, there's not terrible zonks in Cid's pool, at least in my opinion, compared to some of the pools that where you can get some things which aren't terrible, but also aren't, you know, really what you're looking for all of that work you put into it. But, you know, 3 of 4 objectives, just that Darkness Crystal away from, in actual fact, go mode for Direwolf, and, you know, kind of pulling ahead of the pack here. It looks like Bardic did go find that tower key and is going to go up Babel, which I don't hate as a play, but, you know, we know is not going to pay off, and we still haven't found the moon, which is looking more and more like the lunar subterranean is more or less haunted for us. But, you know, seemingly maybe we're not going to see some D-Machines today.
Possibly. I mean, we could see Mac Giant still. That's a possibility. Yeah, D-Machine's looking pretty much out. No real source of weak. So it's a little bit difficult to say what we're going to see from here. I think, you know, we're just going to have to commit to the fact that there's going to be one of those long giant grinds regardless. So really, it's a very fascinating situation. We're just sort of waiting for the next shoe to drop here, and that's, you know, all there is. One thing of note is that if you've not caught many of these races, only 4 of those 5 objectives are hard required to get the crystal in order to fight the final boss. And so because of that, once Direwolf gets through this, ends up getting that Darkness Crystal, will be able to just head straight up to the moon. And once he can take on that Cave Bahamut boss, might go from there. The question is how much of a grind do you really need? I think at this point in time, if you're in Direwolf's shoes, you're probably really only concerned about getting Cure 4 on Rosa, and maybe aren't even that concerned about what happens with Rydia.
Yeah, I don't know that I would be centering my grind around having an extra nuke caster when, you know, the Berserk strats are right here, right in front of us. You know, likely going to be the fastest way to get through our Zeromas. So, yeah, I can't see us doing a huge grind, and maybe you check some lunar bosses and you don't, you know, even really do a grind as we traditionally think of it, and see if we can score some good treasure out of some of the chests up there.
That certainly is possible. And if you're forced to walk down the subterrane anyways, and you think you only need that one chunk of XP, then maybe that is something that you consider doing, because you're walking past 3 boss locations on the way. And another thing benefiting that is we haven't seen the vast majority of the quote-unquote free bosses. The only one we've seen so far is Water Hag, so we still have both sets of guards out there. We still have Dark Imps out there, which are only free in the academic sense in this seat, although we do have Hourglasses, so that'll help. We haven't seen, you know, King and Queen Eblin anywhere, so it's very tempting to want to go for that, because there's a much higher possibility than there would be otherwise that it's a fight that you can complete. And also a lot of the scary fights are out of the way too. Like, we're seeing this Bigan that we know is in top of tower. We're already got Dark Knight Cecil out of the way. He's sitting down at the bottom of Feymarch. So I think that's definitely a very good possibility and a potential strategy you could employ here. Whether or not any of our runners will is another question.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some slightly mean stuff you could find, but if it's just an option, you can face check a couple things when you get down there, and you're not gonna end up where anything else needs to happen here. And
yeah, I think that's the big question is, you know, how much you're willing to risk, and what bosses are particularly scary that you could find there too. Because the flip side of there's a lot of free bosses is, are there a lot of potentially terrifying bosses? And the only things I can think of are, of course, Wyvern in inappropriate locations, and Valvalis in a bad location as well could also be very, very bad to find. But I think a lot of those rude bosses are out of the way. So yeah, I don't know. I think definitely a traditional grind is still a lot more appealing, but I think that's a potential risk you could take.
yeah, absolutely. And I don't know at this point where I'm gonna go to find that traditional grind that would get me what I needed either.
Yeah, I think only Mac Giant is the real option on the table at this point, and I feel like Mac Giant is like the lesser known of the two, so I kind of wonder a little bit, you know, whether some of our newer runners might be as familiar with that too. Because I feel like when you're learning those grinds and you're learning how to set them up and you're practicing them, you definitely practice D Machine first, because it's just so much more likely to be set up for you. So in some ways, there is also the question of, are there going to be runners who aren't particularly familiar with that Mac Giant grind, who are in this race, who are going to end up having that issue because of it? And those are probably the ones who are going to be a lot more tempted to go for those boss spots.
Yeah, I know from myself, I've seen people do it, but, you know, I think the Mac Giants, any of the grinds open to our runners right now seem to be a lot more risky, even in general, than, you know, kind of our D Machine or normal D Machine and our eggs, which, you know, aren't free. You got to set up and you got to make sure you're doing them correctly, but certainly don't pose as much risk as some of the other things may.
Speaking of eggs, it's always weird to me when you see the attack from behind from an egg, which is, how did that egg sneak up on you? It doesn't move, theoretically. Is it just like rolling around and it just like bumps into you from behind? Like, is that what's going on here? Is this like the genesis of Billy Hatcher and the giant egg was in Final Fantasy IV, or what's going on?
I don't know, because the game definitely rubs it in your face too. Is it says surprised, and then there's an egg there, and you have that beat too, where the game lets the egg take an action, and of course the egg doesn't actually take any actions, and so you just sit there staring at an egg for a second, going, "Oh yeah, I was surprised to find an egg on the ground that I popped a siren to find."
Interesting thing on Direwolf's side, going in, grabbing those Cure 3s as a backup, so might be sort of a bit telling for his strategy there, that he could possibly, if he wanted, Berserk the Yang and the Cecil, and then use Sid as a chemist and use that to get through, and then maybe not even bother grinding up for Cure 4 onto Rosa. So that is another light possibility there of you really only need to get Rosa to Berserk 2 party members, and then you're probably fine for the rest as long as you have those Cure 3s and they have enough health. So that's something else to look out for there.
Yeah, for sure. But as we go forward here, we see our runners making those checks that they're going to continue forth on. I do want to encourage everybody watching, if you're not already a part of the Discord or the community, to come on by and join us. We're a very friendly community. It's a little bit too late now, unfortunately, to get into Highway of the Zemus Zone 4, but there's certainly the ladder to join where you can run these same flags or some other flags for us, or for you. And, after the Zemus Zone, we'll probably start up our community clubs again, where we have, all sorts of flags that Anth and I were talking about earlier, some wacky flags, some mystery seeds. You can get involved a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of different ways to participate and run in the community as well. And we invite everybody to come by and join us and experience the fun that is of complaining about Tella and D machines for, the 10th consecutive race or whatever that is.
Yeah, I hate feeling like I'm being a bit of a downer on D machines, but I really just want one seed that doesn't involve D machines. This has been really exciting that we're seeing stuff Tella. And it looks like what Direwolf might be doing here is taking the behemoth encounters on the way down Cave Bahamut, and I haven't seen this one yet. I'm excited to see this. But meanwhile, on Groundflyer's side, my old nemesis, Mr. Tap Dancing Giant, is about to step his way onto the scene here out of the tower, so it looks like he is going for one of those giant grinds.
Yeah, I mean, there's the off chance that we're trying to find Wyvern up here. I don't really think that that's something that I would check. I may face check Element Spot while I'm up here just to see if it's there, but yeah, it looks like we may be fighting some machine giants, which are weak to giant things and machine things.
It just now occurred to me that the Mac and Mac Giant does stand for machine. That's something I wish I had figured out earlier. Learning happens sometimes too. It's another great reason to get involved with the community. You learn all these great things out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I have been spreading the knowledge here for a few days of the giant machines are machines and giants. But yeah, I think we've done it, and we have found the seed where maybe Tella is hiding here somewhere and can enable that D machine grind, but maybe we're not going to stumble upon it, and we're just going to fight some behemoths, and that's how we're going to, kind of move forward in this seed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird situation because we're not in a grind situation where we're kind of like filling time waiting for the grind to happen, but we are still on that waiting for something to happen part. But I think I like Direwolf's plan here more than everything else, is just take these behemoths on the way down. I did not think of this as a possibility, but Groundflyer has found the first Mac Giant he's going to be taking down here, and we're settling in for grind time for him.
Yep. the Mac Giants, pretty much you use what they're weak to and try and take them down, since they have that dual weakness of giant and machine. You know, some lit or some charm, or you know, the various axes and hammers that we can find to make pretty short work of them, which makes this a nice grind. And then anytime that you can find an encounter here, like with the Searcher, that you can continuously summon something out of, if you can continuously kill it, then you're just adding up the experience that you're getting from that fight over and over again. And that's what enables what we were talking about earlier with the slingshot. So it looks like Ground does have his 10 key items, kills a whole bunch of Mac Giants at once. So Rydia will be getting quadruple the normal experience from these Mac Giants, and so it'll take even fewer to get her up to her most powerful. And you know, it makes that slingshot does the uses that experience that you can gain here the most that you can.
Well, down on Direwolf's side, we've just gotten our first peek at what's down here in Cave Bahamut, and it is a King Sprite, but it's not the King Sprite you're hoping for. This is the Odin fight, which, I mean, you shouldn't have too much of a problem with, but still, you know, you're down here, you just got your grind done, you're maybe hoping for a victory lap. Nope, it's Odin. Gonna have to actually fight at this point, but has gotten enough levels out of those behemoth fights. Looks like he's pretty much set up for the Z fight right after that, so very, very good sort of efficiency play, combining those two on Direwolf's side, and really only has to get through this fight now.
Yeah, at 117, the way this seed has been, just kind of heading down the LST and finding out the Zeromus today is looking very, very attractive to us today. Bardic looks like he is finally raising that whale, has been holding on to the Darkness Crystal, but gonna summon our Moon. Moon's not totally haunted today. You do kind of have to go up there, it seems, to do some of our work here, but yeah. Oh, looks like Groundfire is continuing with his grind, and we'll see what we get out of Odin. Sometimes, you know, can't be a key item here at the Cave Bahamut spot, but we do get a Dragoon Lance, so not too bad. You know, I do know that Gungnir was somewhere in Babel, or in the tower, so maybe not super useful, but not horrible to find here.
Definitely not, but I think one thing that we've sort of glossed over a bit here that is extremely worth noting is now that Bardic has gone up to the moon, now that Marty is raising his whales going up to the moon, Groundflyer went to the giant, Direwolf's the only person who did Sealed Cave. Direwolf is the only person who is in go mode because of that. Our other runners do not know that there is an adamant rock sitting at the bottom of the Sealed Cave. So that's another big thing that's going to separate out this field quite a bit, is that anyone else who's done Sealed Cave has that huge advantage. If Bardic, Marty, and Groundflyer all go up to the moon and do a moon dive, they're hoping they hit Wyvern somewhere early along the line. Otherwise, this is going to be one of those situations where you make a really good choice by the numbers, but rando gonna rando, and it ended up being a wrong one for this seed.
Yeah, and it looks like we have another duplicate Rosa up here in the character spot on the moon. So, yeah, I mean, if Tella's here, he's on the giant. So we have accomplished everyone's goal that, you know, we do not have a D-Machine grind open to us, at least at this point, unless you're going to go through the giant and then come back. And Bardic, as we were pointing out earlier, using those Hourglass 2s to take these King Ryu fights, you can stop them, and then it doesn't matter how long it takes you to get through them, and you get a big old infusion of experience when you do this here. So, yeah, some very nice sort of end of the road divergence here for our runners, and, you know, giving us some nice variety of uh, how people are tackling the end of this seed here, while we see Direwolf head down, and we'll see if Dire decides to face check some of these spots. I would be super tempted to, but I do also think that Dire has enough power just to head on in and see where he can get for Zeromus.
Yeah, and it's interesting too how the different circumstances of our runners have really changed how these grinds have gone. Ground Flyer, ooh, there's a sparkle. This could be big, but Ground Flyer, the only one to have gone through a giant grind so far. Bardic, oh, there is Wyvern on the giant. Ground Flyer has just found the one out that will take care of not going down the sealed cave. This is potential tragedy for Bardic and Marty, who are both on the moon at the moment, but absolutely huge for Ground Flyer right now.
And we get a nice glance out of Wyvern, and we'll see how this goes. This may be a little bit rough for us here, Rydia. Maybe our saving grace, but we do have that Witch Burn flag on for us. So instead of doing the opening Mega Nuke, which is extremely rude, especially when we're requiring it, Wyvern takes a random ability and inflicts it upon our party, kind of depending on that ability's stats, either one or all of our party. And this glance is one of the more fun ones where everybody is queued up in actions that are not going to help us very much here.
Yep, we are back down to only one confused, but very importantly, to give a very, very quick spiel, there are over 500 different sprites possible in this pool. We cannot move Zeromus around. It would not be fair if you walked into the waterfall cave and suddenly you had the Zeromus fight, so he gets to stay here right at the end of the game where he belongs as the final boss. And that does lead to a very, very important question that we've got going on here. Softnum, would you like to take that question today?
Sure, and what we need to figure out here is whose butt are we going to kick tonight, or this afternoon, one supposes. And does it have a butt? Is it cute? Why is it here? These are all questions that will be answered soon.
Definitely, but this is one of those races where it's definitely been an exciting way here, because we've had so many different routes here and only one of them paid off. And sometimes you get those divergences in route and you see they end up kind of shaking up to be the same. But this has definitely been one of those everyone matters here, and I love that sprite. That's wonderful.
I don't think I'm familiar with this actual character. I assume it's from Powerpuff Girls? That's what it looks like to me.
Correct. That is him from Powerpuff Girls.
I obviously haven't watched enough Powerpuff Girls because I don't recognize this character, but the art style is distinctive, and it looks like, Rydia ain't the counter nuke, which I guess we're probably not super sad about here. We're just going to make our gentleman angry and take care of him for us here today, and I don't imagine that Dire's going to have a lot of problems here, but we'll keep a close eye on it. Oh, and it looks like Groundfire took a wipe to the Wyvern. That's very, very unfortunate. Have to head back in here and try again.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where this is a trickier fight than it seems. These giant spots can be absolutely brutal at any point in time in the game, and it's great to find Wyvern, but why did it have to be here? Why couldn't he have been hiding, in the super cannon room or something like that? But if he'd have been hiding in the super cannon room, this would have been a lot less interesting of a race, so we'll see if Ground Flyer can get through that now. And as you mentioned, Direwolf in a very, very stable spot, just going to go ahead and sit on Rose's turn, having berserked everyone up. Unless he gets high rolled on that Rosa, should be fine to just sort of coast through on those 3 berserkers. I think Rydia getting hit with that counter nuke might have actually been the best thing for him in this case, solely because he's sort of resigned himself to not having that Rydia be a factor ages ago. So in this case, it landed on the one character he doesn't really care about keeping alive here, Really just needs to get this damage down. Meanwhile, Bardic is through that Odin spot. Marty's struggling with it a little bit, looking like he is going to take a wipe there, so we'll see how that happens here. It looks like he's going to end up just possibly trying again, or possibly trying to find levels first.
Yeah, looks like Marty's checking his equipment situation, trying to figure out if he has anything that will help him through that fight. I do wonder too, on the Wyvern spot, it being here is really rude, but if it had cast, let's say, Berserk instead of Glance, I wonder if we would have a lot easier time getting through here. Berserk, almost one of the better things to find depending on your party composition at the Witchburn spot. But yeah, it looks like the rest of our runners here, all checking various parts of the moon and, really trying to find the rest of that unlock here that Bardic that Dire and Groundflyer have found, that kind of last objective. And we already have rocks on Dire's side, so doesn't look like we'll be very much longer for this world. Zemus won't be very much longer for this world. Did get that black hole, but should not pose much of a problem.
I'm really interested in seeing where his finishing position is, because I would not be entirely surprised if this ends up being the 2 in a row, as Direwolf does end up getting through that Zeromus fight in 6th place with a time of 1:26.56. We'll see if we can get him in for an interview, but another fantastic finish for Direwolf, and that should pretty much cement him in that top 16.
Yeah, for sure. The win yesterday and setting the time for both of the last 2 qualifiers has to feel pretty good here. Hope that we can pick Direwolf's brain here as we see our other runners kind of finding their own way through this seed. It looks like Bardic was able to complete that Cave Bahamut fight and is heading down here, probably hoping to find Wyvern on one of these spots down here at the bottom of the lunar subterrane.
Definitely. It is unfortunate that we do know this is a bit of a haunted check here. I think the best option for Bardic right now is that he finds maybe like the hook and the harp and then decides, okay, I want to go back down to Earth, and maybe stays down there. I don't think it's particularly likely, though. It's just deeply unfortunate, because I think taking the risk of not checking Sealed Cave, while it's not necessarily something I would have done in that situation, you got to take risks if you're going to get somewhere when you're running a little bit behind at the start in terms of the qualifier standing. So I have nothing but like complete admiration for the thought process behind getting there, and it's just deeply unfortunate this isn't going to pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting check at that point, right? I'm not sure there was ever really a point where it was the only check available for any of the runners that we've been watching today. So, but it being where you can simply face check it and you can reset out if it's nothing, it's a great heads up where Dire decided to take it. And it sounds like we are joined by Direwolf. GG's on the 6th place today.
Thank you.
So how did you find that seed? Talk us through how you're feeling right now.
I'm feeling pretty okay. Besides, I'm a little disappointed in my old friend, the Assassin Dagger, right now. That was pretty aggravating.
Explain that to me. I don't think I saw the Assassin Dagger let you down.
I was trying to take care of a couple of eggs before I went into the sealed cave, and it was feeling stingy about the swoon procs.
Oh, yes, and that is the egg Assassin Dagger is one of the harder things to pull off, because you don't have that knowledge of when their turn was and can't force the swoon proc like you can in some locations. So, but it turns out you had some really great routing on this seed. Tell us about your tell us about the choice to check Luca Cave.
I didn't feel like dealing with Baigan. I wasn't armed for it, really. And I had forgotten that I hadn't checked Dwarf Castle yet. So that was next on the list. I figured I'd see what's in there.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense, and turns out to have been one of the easier ways through the seed. It looks like, um, spoilers a little bit, but Wyvern did end up on the Elements spot, so we're not gonna find them down on the Lunar Subterrane anyway. So, that Luca
fun.
key, yeah, that was quite the fun check for us here. But yeah, and it looks like, and you did the Bahamut grind. How did you find that?
That went quite well. Once I got that Gigant Axe, that was what I was going to do. Realized, well, Kokol just gave me all the gear I need to keep Rosa alive, so we only need mid-40s or so, and we'll be fine. Just smack him with the Crystal Axe.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, it's been a lot of fun to watch you and the other racers make your way through the seed. Enth, do you have questions for Dyer here?
I sure do. So what led you to decide on Behemoth Grind for your grind for EXP in the seed? Because we've seen 3 different grinds right now, so I kind of want to know, what was that decision for you?
Well, like I was just saying, the Gigant Axe, it's basically a crystal sword. And we had the classic power couple, plus 2 big old piles of HP to act as chemists if things, went pear-shaped. I figured that would be the fastest way to get my experience in while taking care of an objective.
Yeah, it turns out to have been wonderful routing for you here, and great execution on all of your checks. Really just a joy to watch everybody's kind of route through the seed that was not, like the other seeds, like a very straightforward. There was very few points where everybody was funneled through. There was kind of one in the middle, but we see that typically. But just some very interesting choices for everyone, and thank you for being featured here. It was a joy.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. And thank you, commentators and Restream team and Tracker. I don't have the list at the moment.
No worries. I'm, putting on a show like that for us. We cannot blame you there, but we certainly appreciate the thought as well. And other questions of note for Dyer?
I think the one last question I have is, I think with this 6th place finish, you're pretty much a lock for that top 16. How do you feel about that?
I'm feeling pretty good about it. Although I didn't expect to get kicked off that list at this point. I'm just running to try and get up to 2nd or 3rd so I don't have to be in pancake screw. That's really the only reason I'm still running.
Definitely a valid reason, and this will definitely help towards that. So again, thank you for joining us today.
All right, thank you.
And that was a great show, and it looks like our other runners are finding their various ways through seed. Groundflyer did make his way through the Wyvern at Elements and is heading down probably for their Z fight right now. I didn't catch Ground's levels, but I wonder... Oh, he did the Mac Giant grind, so should be just kind of finding him and, applying the same technique that we've seen earlier here, while Bardic is checking the moon bosses, and Marty seems to be kind of thinking about where they want to go.
It's deeply unfortunate because I had mentioned wanting to find that hook and harp and hoping that would force Bardic back to Earth to check all of those, but it seems like he's still holding out for that adamant rock in one of these spots, or holding out for a wyvern at one of these boss positions, so still not going to find that. And I gotta think that he's not going to the giant at this point in time. Like, I think if you're in Bardic's shoes and you haven't gone to the giant yet, you've committed to level grinding elsewhere, both through these bosses and through the couple of King Ryu's. He's at endgame levels at this point. he needs to go to that sealed cave and get that adamant rock. And it's unfortunate, but again, these are all really good decisions here. Like, if I was in that position, I would probably also be going through all these moon bosses. So really, it's definitely, he's been putting on a very good show.
Absolutely. And just, I'm at least checking who everyone is up here, even if I don't complete all the checks, because I don't want to have to come back a second and third time to possibly chase after an objective that I left to go chase something on the blue planet. And we have our officers and soldiers here, so should not, one of those quote-unquote free bosses that we were looking at here shouldn't pose too much of a problem, especially with that coffin on the officer. Soldiers will help Bardic take care of them for them. For those of you slightly newer, if the officer doesn't say to attack, the soldiers just kind of get antsy and attack each other, so kind of see that amusement here for us.
Yeah, this is a good fight, and it's especially just interesting to see all these bosses here, because this is such a nice moon that we know is completely haunted. It's been very kind in its boss locations so far. Nothing particularly difficult anywhere. And it does look like Marty now is going to be heading to the Giant for his grind. I did see him setting up that seed there. I believe he dropped a save near Sealed Cave. I might have missed that. I know he went underground for a reason, or might have just been shopping down in Baymarch. I sort of looked away while he was down there. So it'll be interesting to see how long that takes him and where he goes from there. If he follows the temptation to follow that Giant grind with a moon play and doesn't check that element spot, then that could be quite bad. But other than that, there's a pretty high chance that he gets go mode out of this.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. I think that if I remember correctly, on the second qualifier that we had both commentated, Marty did also face check the element spot up here the first time. So if they follow the same pattern, then yeah, should find that Wyvern. Hopefully doesn't give them too many problems. But Ground Fire looks like they've gotten into the him fight, the Z fight, and is looks like Power Overwhelming is going to carry the day here with 4,000 hit points on everybody. I just can't see this going south at all.
Absolutely. I think we're definitely in a point where our remaining runners aren't going to have a problem with the Z fight. Once Marty gets through this grind, he'll be at pretty similar levels to Ground Flyer. Bardic, having gotten all of this XP out of the moon, is going to definitely be at Power Overwhelming levels. So really at this point, it's just our remaining two runners who haven't found their way to that Z fight finding their way there. We are seeing a Mom Bomb here, which is not great because you never want to see an extra 9,000 hit points at any location. But, there's not too much that's posing a threat to Bardic at this point getting through these. So I gotta think the big question is, what do you check first? Do you check music or do you check Luke Cave? And I am concerned that the answer might be music.
And I'm going to blame chat on that, because I think that if you're being restreamed and you found harp somewhere that may be buried, you might do it for the stream. And so, chat, this is all your fault.
Personally, I'm on team always music because I just like the way it sounds. I always go there, even when I'm not being, I've never been restreamed for this community, but even if I were being restreamed or not being restreamed, I would definitely go harp. The good news about Bardic's play is that a lot of this time that he's spending on these bosses is going to be earned back, because on the basis of the path he's taking through the seed, I'm going to say that it's probably pretty much 90% likely he's going to find the pass at some point in time. So he'll be able to skip that walk down the subterranean. It's not a great consolation prize, but is a little bit of a consolation prize. That some of these fights, the time he's taking on it, will essentially be erased by not having to make that long walk.
Yeah, and, the experience here isn't unwelcome. And So, and we get a defense sword out of the Murasame altar. So, still probably looking for that pass on Bardic's side here. And GG's to Groundflyer, and we are joined by Groundflyer in the booth. GG's Groundflyer.
Thanks. What a seed.
Yeah, I have to say up here in the commentary booth, we did enjoy it. So what are your thoughts on the seed?
Well, first of all, I mean, I was looking at the kind of, in race and the spoiler chat and stuff like that, just looking at what's going on. I had assumed that, like, I didn't know where Adamant Rock was. Actually, I didn't even pay attention to the scroll. Where was Adamant Rock?
Adamant was in Sealed Cave.
Okay. Right. Got it. So, yeah, that's the one thing I faded on the way up to grinding in the moon and stuff. And then I'm like, after the grind, like, I felt really good. I just got enough levels for ready to get nuke and everything. I'm like, I got to check out the element spot, like, just, like, it's right here. I just got to check it. And I saw it was Wyvern. I'm like, oh, my God. And then glance happened. I'm like, what is this nightmare? Oh, it's so funny, though. But I ended up blowing it up. I mean, the reflect nukes were not doing all that much damage there. I just made a little hiccup mistake with throwing the Sylph down, just like, I need to heal up, and I totally forgot, oh yeah, no Star Veils are up, that's a bad thing. But yeah, that little mistake that I made there, like, I had to wipe and reset, that cost me like 6 places in the rankings, like 5 people finished in the same minute that I did, basically.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate. Looks like you did finish in 26th with an official time of 1:40:39.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so we saw Dyer, did find the rock and didn't end up going to the giant at all. Decided to do some behemoths, or a behemoth, I believe, instead of heading up and doing some Mac giant. So I guess the question we've been asking is, how did you decide what grind to do?
Like, I looked at my team and I'm like, I got Thunderclaw Yang, I've got like axes, I've got an Earth Hammer, and I've got Crystal Armor Cecil. Like, he's geared out for crit, So it just felt like, to me, just like natural that I should just go in there. Like, I was blowing up giants in like 2 seconds. So that was kind of my logic on it. I guess I didn't think about time efficiency in that respect. I definitely leveled to get Rydia up to nuke, which was good, but I don't know if the time spent doing that grind was efficient enough. Obviously not now. Now that I know that Luca had go mode for me, I don't know if I would have gone to the same care to bother to get nuke and all that stuff. I might have just done some quicker stuff and get enough levels to do some Zerks, and then I would have probably gotten into Z faster. That's the one thing I feel a little bummed about, is that I missed Luca, but that Wyvern fight was a lot of fun, and so yeah, I thought I actually got like an edge up on some folks, because like only the people that are doing the giant grind are going to check this first giant spot, but ultimately, because that Luca key was somewhat readily available, that didn't end up being a super huge plus for me. But I still made my way through, and I feel pretty decent about my play. Like, I know that I'm like middle of the road ranking wise, but I felt like I was very efficient. I just need to kind of cut back on some little time issues and stuff like that, but otherwise I feel pretty good about my play.
Absolutely. And a question that I have, I want to take you back about an hour and a half into the seed here.
That's a lot of time.
An hour and a half back, rather, right at the start. You were one of 2 runners we had on the restream who actually did go through that gauntlet on Mount Hobbs to grab that Yang.
Yeah.
What led to you making that decision?
I was just like, you know what? I've got a DKC who's garbage. I don't know what's going to be at Ordeals to get him not garbage, and I was planning on going there just because there were so many bosses. Like, there were so many bosses to find. There were 2 new objective bosses, plus there was Wyvern, plus there was Mist Dragon. So I'm like, 4 places. There's 3 bosses up there. That's math. Let's do it. So I wanted to have a little insurance in case like a Sid with an axe was not going to be able to do miraculous work against either the Mylon or especially the Mylon Z spot, which ultimately ended up being that evil wall. And immediately when I saw that, I'm like, I feel really good about this decision, because like that's I don't know how hard that evil wall would have been to punch through otherwise with just the Sid. Like I was getting hit for actually like reasonable damage, and the wall was going pretty fast.
And can't force the swoon proc like you can in some locations. So yeah, and I would agree with your earlier point too. I think that if you watch with the commentary and everything, I can't disagree with almost anybody's routing decisions today on stream with the knowledge that you gained. And, there's just sometimes you take, what's close to a 50-50 and you go the right way or the wrong way. So absolutely agree that, everybody made great routing decisions, and some of them pay off and some of them don't.
Actually, I'm curious. I saw Direwolf was the first one in the restream to finish. What was his choice of grind? Do you recall?
Yeah, Dyer decided that he did a behemoth on the way to the Cave Bahamut altar. So didn't really do what we would call a traditional grind per se, but ended up with plenty of levels. Had also taken that Rydia, but didn't really level the Rydia. Kind of went power overwhelming on Z, which I feel like is going to turn out to be most people's decision today.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I have to think about that in terms of future routing. Like, I just thought, okay, getting Rydia to nuke, like, it's going to be decently fast here going the Mac Giant route. But I don't know if that's necessarily the fastest play. Like, maybe I don't worry about getting that Rydia up to nuke, because that is a lot of levels. I did ultimately have to do, I think it was 8 giants on a double XP with a slingshot to get her there. So I don't know if that's necessarily worth the time and effort that I put into it. But I don't feel horrendous about it. Obviously, like, I still ended up, middle of the pack in terms of how I played. So, it isn't the end of the world, but I definitely would like to tighten things up a little bit. And really the biggest place where I need to work, and I think most people probably do with these flags, is like, what is your grind? How do you grind? Like, obviously D-money's come up a lot, but sometimes you have to do some weird stuff to make that work, or whatever the other grind is, like what's fast, what actually is decently efficient, and makes it so you don't have to go like 5 minutes out of the way and stuff.
All right. Well, Softnum, did you have any more questions for Ground Flyer?
No, I don't think so. GG's, and thank you for putting on a great show for us today.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks to you and Softnum both for doing comms. It's been probably gonna be amazing. The interview's been awesome. I'm looking forward to checking the restream. Thanks to Warlink for pushing the buttons, and thanks to Moonblaze Wolf for bringing the restream to everybody. Y'all are a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure racing, and I look forward to, I think I'm almost definitely advancing to the next round, so I'm looking forward to seeing who my opponent is going to be. But yeah, have a good one, everybody.
Yep.
Yes,
thank you very much.
So I believe that we are going to get our music here. So I think that Nth and I will be quiet for a little bit so you can enjoy the wonderful harp music.
So, on that note, as much as I hate to interrupt the harp time, it does look like Marty has gotten through his Mac Giant grind and is now going to be heading to this element spot. Will find Wyvern here, so it's just that one fight away. Arctic now through that sealed cave, on his way to the bottom of the moon, so we'll be finishing pretty soon here. I gotta think there's not too much that could possibly go wrong in the Z fight for either of these runners at this point. There is definitely some stuff that could go wrong in this Wyvern fight, though.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sorry. I love the glance. I've seen it a few times, but it's just hilarious to me the things that your characters decide to do here when confused. Cecil casting exit, Cecil healing wyvern. These are a few of my favorite things. One supposes peeking himself. I crack up every time I've seen it so much, but it just doesn't matter. I love it.
It's, I love the Switchburn flag. I didn't think that I would like it as much because I haven't seen as much of it going in. It's a bit like, but what if it's something that's not as strong as Mega Nuke and you lose that instant, kind of always still funny moment in which you realize it's a wyvern unless it's in a bad spot, at which point in time it's a tragic moment. But yeah, this is definitely entertaining. Definitely not entertaining, though, is your Porum, who you've managed to grind up to Cure 4, turning around and throwing that on the wyvern you're trying to take down right now.
Not only curing the wyvern that you just cast wide on and undoing almost all that damage, but also having wyvern put up a nice wall for you so that he can nuke you. So, looks like we're having a little bit of trouble here, but should be able to recover. I don't imagine that this is going to become a real problem, but something to watch out for as Bardic makes their way down to Zeromus to find him and dispatch him quite solidly here.
Definitely. It's always a scary fight, no matter what. Although, I guess if you get the confusion again, then you'll be bouncing healing spells off that wall, so it's not as scary now that this is going on. So there is some fringe benefits to this. But on the whole, I think, he's in very stable shape at this point in time. Just the only downside is that Sid is not decided to hit himself, so hasn't quite knocked himself out of the charm state yet.
Yeah, for sure. And apart from sort of the free set that we had been talking about, there's not really anybody you want to see on elements that you have to kill anyway, I don't think. I'm not really convinced that there's a fight I'm here and it's something that I actually have to work for. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to see. It's outside of like King or Queen Evelyn and things like that. So yeah, probably as stable as we're going to see here. Sid doing 1 damage to Rosa. Great.
Yeah, and also importantly, we have that wall down on Cecil in addition to Cecil being Berserk. So we're going to have those nukes coming off of Rydia. We'll have possibly White coming off of Rosa as well, although might be a bit changed by Rydia going down here with that Cure 4 off Porum. Just a little bit late, but still just getting through this. And meanwhile, Bardic has hit this Zeromus fight, looking like he'll still come in under the 2-hour mark, which, given everything this seed has put him through for decision making, is pretty much a really good prize there.
Yeah, absolutely. Not really seeing, like I said in the interview, it's not really seeing any fault with the runners, just sort of some interesting kind of 50-50s to have taken, and fading that Luca key is something that I'm sure a lot of people have done in the past and can sympathize with, and it just turned out to be the wrong thing to do.
I mean, just looking at this restream, 75% of our runners have faded that Luca key until it was the last option in this case for Bardic. So really, yeah, definitely. It's going to be a bit of a 2-tier set of results on the whole in this large qualifier on the basis of whether or not you went to that Luca key spot. And this is what these races are all about. It's all about those little decisions and how they pay off. And, it all works out in the end. And definitely has worked out in this case for Bardic. Seeing just the progress in these 3 weeks of qualifiers from the last time too has been amazing to see. So it's pretty exciting there too.
Yeah, having the personally having the almost bookends commentary job and seeing the difference in some of our runners who are joining us for again that I saw before, and just seeing the improvement has been excellent here. I feel like both Marty and Bartek put on a much improvement over the 12 qualifiers between then and now.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the tale of this tournament too, is, I keep looking at these standings and thinking, if you'd have, completely isolated me out of the community in terms of like not seeing the ladder results and like that, and just based off of knowledge from the Lollyho League alone made me guess who would be like the top 16, I think I maybe would have gotten 4 or 5 right at this point in time, because everyone in this community is improving so much, like race on race, tournament on tournament, that this bracket stage, when we start it next week, is going to be intense to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I was just thinking while you were going over that is, like, I don't envy the top 16 having to draft the rest of the field. I don't feel like there's a lot of obvious choices that you want in your side of the bracket.
Yeah, that's definitely something we should go over real quick for the benefit of the audience. So for those who aren't familiar with the format of Zemus Zone 4, the way that it works is we have these 15 qualifier races. Your score is calculated based on your time relative to the top 6 finishers. So in this case, relative to Direwolf and everyone who finished in front of Direwolf. And only your top 4 scores count. And the top 64 make it into the bracket stage, but the top 16 get to draft their opponents in their little sort of pod of 4 for their part of the bracket. And so not only is getting into the top 64 important for continuing on in the tournament, but that top 16 is your way of ensuring that you're not going to run into like the top people at the top of our thing. Like looking at the unofficial standings, the top 5 going into this, race, Pancras, you don't want to be against Dakar, who's been on a roll. Same with Plumeria, who's run basically every qualifier so far and has been absolutely terrifying to see in terms of like speed and all of them. You don't want to go up against CNC or Solaris either. Your goal is to get into that top 16 so that you can be against, people that you've picked that you think you'll have a better chance against, and at least survive until you get past those first 2 rounds, at which point in time you're starting to mingle with the other groups here.
Yeah, for sure. And it looks like that Bartek is seeing the rocks, and so we are probably not far from, and is, like you predicted, is going to fall just squeak under that 2-hour time here. So, really great to see again our runners finish that way. So, yeah, and it looks like GG's for Bartek, Panda, and they are joining us in the booth today. GG's, Bartek.
Thanks. A little annoyed that I skipped Sealed Cave, but...
Well, you are in good company, at least on our restream. I was only 1 out of 4 of our restreamers actually did Luca Key check at a point where it would have sped up their game, so you're in pretty good company there. But how do you feel like the seed went?
I know I made some routing decisions that skipping them might have saved me some time, but overall I think other than did pretty well.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. One of the things we've been saying all through this race is that this was one of those seeds that had a ton of different divergent paths, and you were running extremely well. It just ended up being that the path that you took just wasn't the right one today, but it was an extremely strong performance regardless.
Yeah, I normally skip Luca just because it's annoying to get through, and I never really mastered the whole warp out strat.
Yeah, the warp out is something. And I, like Em said, I think after the first 15 or 20 minutes, we were judging you to have been ahead for the fades you made. You found your way through the blue planet really, really efficiently.
I think part of that was the fact that I went, I don't have a Sid weapon. Let me check Fabul. Those quakes from the Earth Hammer really sped me up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you got Yang off of Hobbs earlier than anybody as well, if I remember right, through that Earth Hammer.
Yeah, that Earth Hammer let me just speed right through the gauntlet there.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to ask, was it just the Earth Hammer that made you decide that gauntlet was a good decision at that point, or was there something else that led you to make that decision? Because you were one of the 2 runners on the restream who actually went through that.
I went to check it after grabbing the hammer, so I at least had something better than the wooden one for Sid. And if I hadn't had the hammer, I probably would have reset out. But with the hammer, I knew that I could just AoE them and get through them quickly. So that was a big decision on me actually keeping Yang. And by the time I found somebody I'd replace him with, he was a high enough level that it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, I believe that, I know that at least most of our runners made the same choices eventually, right? Of the parties kind of seemed to align with your early burly folk to deal out the damage, and sort of, except for Rydia, just a lack of black magic, and that does make some of your choices make a lot of sense. So talk us through your kind of grind decision, or do you feel like you even did a grind, or how do you feel that went?
The only grind I really did was me going, okay, I have 10 key items. On my way to Bahamut, I'll use these hourglasses I have. And otherwise it was just me trying to clear the moon to see if there was the adamant or the wyvern or something there.
Yeah, I mean, in that, you're the only one on stream who did that, but again, I think everybody made really great choices today. It's just sort of those points of those 50-50s, or, what you do and what you don't do that determine this. And, sometimes it turns out and sometimes it doesn't, but, everybody made really great plays, and it was a joy to see today.
Well, I have gotten a lot better since the qualifier started, so I'm not disappointed, really.
Absolutely. That's one of the things we touched on too, is, we were here the last time, I believe you were on the restream back on qualifier number 2. So it's good to have the team back together again. And seeing the improvement between then and now has been really great to see. And I really look forward to seeing you, not just if you're in the later race as well, but also, next tournament and going forward is going to be great to see you in more of these races.
I look forward to it as well. Hopefully I keep improving, and with Dire Wolf on the stream, when I watch this later, I'll have a great example to compare myself with.
Absolutely. Sofnum, did you have any other questions?
No, I think that's good, but thank you for putting on a great show for us. It's been really, really entertaining, and again, I echo, it's been great to see everybody's growth here.
All right, well, have fun.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for letting us be restreaming here. And it looks like Marty is now in the end of this fight as well.
Yep, looks like we are continuing our fight here, successfully nerfed the first big bang. And as kind of we've been saying, I'm not sure Marty's going to have a lot of problems with this fight. One of the other things when you were talking about how this is going to go is I think our entire field is really, really strong. And I wanted to point out that it looks like to get into top 64, you have a variance of about 20 to 25% on your time that you had to maintain, and that's creating a really, really tight field for us in this qualifier stage.
Yeah, and again, for those of you who are watching today, if you have not gotten enough free enterprise, which there's never too much free enterprise, I refuse to believe that you are saying that in that case. The final qualifier for this tournament is tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure you're tuning in for that as well, because that will be where we're setting that top 64, where we're setting that top 16. It is the last chance for everyone. So please, if you're enjoying this race, make sure you join us for that tonight too.
Definitely, I will be in the audience with everybody who decides to show up tonight. You have a great crew who's gonna take you through it, and yeah, it'll be an exciting finale. I think, especially the way this seed was. I expect great things tonight.
Absolutely, I'm very much looking forward to watching it, and I'm also looking forward to watching Marty get through the rest of this fight here. Is having a little bit low health, but I think a Big Bang just went off. I sort of looked away for a moment to make sure that I knew what was going on here. And yeah, it's really exciting to know that this qualifier is almost over and that we're about to get to that bracket phase where we're going to have hundreds of 1v1 matches ready to go, all of which are going to be exciting. And, it'll be great to be able to sit back and hear Cubs Rule and Sheep Launcher on the comms giving us the what's going on of the race too. It's always nice to be on the viewing side occasionally as well.
Yeah, I have fun no matter how I participate in this community. Invite everybody to come by and see with us. It looks like our Cecil dropped. I kind of wonder what the story is there, but probably shouldn't be a huge deal for us. Marty making his way through just like everybody did. Yeah, this has been a great qualifier time, and to your point, if you want to see more free enterprise, hold on. There are going to be, 30 to 40 races for the next couple weeks here with our best of 3 starting in the bracket stage, and there will be a lot of free enterprise for everybody to take a part of.
Definitely. That Cecil did end up going down because he had the wall on him that they were using to bounce nukes and whites off, because Marty has gone for hybrid strats here. Because he does not have that Yang in his party, ends up having, Rosa, Porum, Rydia, so those reflects are important, and just didn't quite get healing off onto Cecil at that point. But there is the final hit. GG's, Marty finishing with a time of 2:07:51, and we'll see if we can get him in here for a quick interview as well.
Yep, and I kind of wonder if he managed to skip the refill there with one of his couple of their bounce spells, because I didn't see a lot there. And Marty's joining us in the booth. GG's, Marty.
Thank you.
So how did you find the seed today?
I hated it. Well, that sounds really bad. I haven't been having this class. It's not been kind to me, I guess is the best way to put it. But I mean, this at least I didn't forfeit out of it. So there's that. Yeah,
I think you did really great through the flags. Honestly, like some of the choices weren't really you making a wrong choice. It was just a different choice, and we've been saying that as we do the interviews. If you watch back, I think everybody made really pretty good choices today, and you managed the grind pretty well, and the Z fight looked very, very clean. So I think you did great.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. That's nice to hear, to be honest, because especially after the fight again, I was very, very frustrated not being kind to myself, I guess.
Yeah, I think kind of the story of the seed is it was a lot of it was. You have the occasional seed that's like a straight line with a few little forks in the road along the way. And this seed was a giant old plate of spaghetti where every path went in completely different ways. And, everyone we had on the restream made very different decisions, but everyone we had on the restream made very sensical and smart decisions on the basis of what they had. And on that note, a question I want to ask you. is how did you decide on doing that Mac Giant grind? And also, how did you feel when you found that Wyvern at that element spot?
So the Mac Giant is just like, I wanted a grind because I only had like, it just felt like it was, I wanted levels because I didn't want to put myself in a situation where I have to like rely on finding like an edge or something to get sirens, and I feel like I needed a grind because I don't want to put myself in a really horrible position somewhere down the line. And just like with a go mode, and then suddenly it's like, well, what do I do? And then I end up having to do the Mac Giant anyways, so I just thought, okay, well, I can do the Mac Giant now. I can slingshot 2 mages, and I can set up for reflect strats easily, so I can do that right now, and I'll just be able to cruise through whatever the seed has to offer, basically, up to that point.
And I would say that's how that turned out for you. So it was a really good play. So did you have any points in the seed where you made a decision that like maybe you would make differently, or is that, you know, you described being somewhat frustrated, but you know,
I would have reset out of the Baigan.
Yeah.
I think I should have realized that fight is really dumb and that I should get out of there.
Yeah, knowing when to knowing when to cut off those checks and not take the time to see if you can squeak it by is one of those things that you know, is a constant learn. I still don't do it very well, so
another thing is maybe I don't take that Odin and I save it for later. It took me 3 tries, so maybe I thought I could do it, so I just took it, but maybe I should have grinded first. I don't know. I don't think it would have made like that big a difference, but
certainly it was required, and so once you were there, you know, it's I can't fault the decision to go through with it and try and get it done. You're going to lose the time either way at that point. Nth, do you have any other questions for Marty?
Absolutely not. You ran a very good race, and you know, I think it's easy to sort of look back and say, you know, reset out of it, but I know that I would have also just been like, there's an Odin there, I need to do this, I'm gonna go through it anyways. So I would say that you definitely made good decisions there, even if they didn't end up paying out quite as much.
Okay, thank you for running for us, Marty, and thank you for agreeing to be restreamed. It's been a joy, and it's been a joy to see everybody's growth, including your own, through the qualifier stages. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. See you.
So that's going to about wrap it up for our broadcast this afternoon. I would like to remind everybody that we do have a 7 p.m. Eastern, the last qualifier, as we were just talking about. Our top 6 for qualifier 14 were Solaris, Baka Shinobi, Sorbius, Tybalt, Flurry 14, and then, as we know, Direwolf.
Absolutely, and I want to give a big thanks to all of our runners, and also, of course, to our restream team, the behind-the-scenes portion, Moonblaze Wolf doing the restreaming and rolling a very, very interesting to watch seed for us, as well as Warlink doing an excellent job on the tracking. And with that, for the next few hours while we've got this break, we're going to be sending you over to a Big Toe who is doing a ladder race in the Lollyho League redo flag set. A quick reminder on ladder etiquette: please do not try and suggest and help in any way, and please do not try and find out his opponent and let him know. You have to remain in the dark for that on the ladder. And also, please, no spoilers on how this race went in case anyone watching wants to run it back later. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you back here in a few hours for the final qualifier.